Hi, at Pattern Project, our mission is to transition the $0.8 trillion mass manufacturing industry to on demand AI driven production. I'm Shruti Grover, I'm a design engineer. I led a manufacturing business which grew to $1.5 million in India. And this is Simon Johnson, he's the CTO, and he has 15 plus years of experience in software development. You have your own agency with parametric data design as a specialty, and I've advised number 10 at the UN. So the problem with Simon and I are tackling together is that of overproduction in the fashion industry. I don't know how many of you know this, but every brand has to order their inventory 6 to 9 months before it hits the shelves. Despite using the best of demand forecasting software, a typical brand will get their estimates out by 30%. This means that every year as an industry, there are 40 billion items which are never sold and are either dumped into the sea or sent to the landfill or at worst incinerated. As an environmental problem, this costs the earth 490 million tons of CO2 equivalent and $300 billion per annum. Just between H&M and ASOS, there are $5.6 billion of unsold inventory sitting in their warehouses. We're offering fashion brands a chance to transition to a no-brainer model, which is on-demand production. Produce clothes after they've been sold. And our AI-driven supply chain and digital twin service for made-to-order garment manufacturing for the first time makes it cost-effective and fast to adopt this approach. There are 4 key drivers why this is the right time for on-demand production to be adopted. First, companies are adopting digital twin manufacturing systems at a rate of 60% per annum, so this sector is growing fast. Secondly, first time since the 1990s, fashion executives are actually considering nearshoring as an option. This is because of climate change affecting a lot of far shore countries. We have a regulation coming in, which is the ultimate motivator for brands to switch to on-demand production. So EU is going to ban sending unsold clothes to landfill by 2030, and it's going to force every brand to declare how much overproduction they have. Finally, brands themselves, as you know, have been facing a lot of consumer pressure, and they've come out and declared 30 to 40% reduction in emissions as targets by 2030. So we're offering brands an exciting transition. We're saying, take this opportunity to not just shift from mass manufacturing to on-demand production, but really redefine new, because you're faced with a lot of competition from the rental and resale market. And the way you can redefine new is by taking advantage of on-demand production's special ability, which is if you're selling garments one by one, they no longer have to be in standard sizes. You can produce each garment to perfectly fit the customer who's ordered them. When they do so, they can increase their market size by up to 25%. They can increase their full price sell-through because they no longer have to have excess stock, which they are forced to sell at a discount or in clearance sales afterwards. They will have no lost sales because if an item is doing well, we just produce more of it.
So we're doing this through our defensible streamlined IP. The first bit is the parametric patterns, and this is where a brand gives us their style and we fit it to one of our templates, turning it into a custom fit garment. We connect the brands straight to the factories via our platform, so when an order's made, it instantly can go into production. And most importantly, we have our AI factory management, the first in the world for on-demand manufacturing resource planning. When you're doing traditional mass manufacturing, you book out a whole line for say 2 weeks, passing the garment from person to person. When on demand is, you don't know what garments are coming through, so this software makes sure it gets to the right person through the right machine at the right time. And because we're tracking garments one by one, we have built-in provenance of who's worked on it, where it was made, and what material. So our business model has 3 income streams. 2 come from the brand. We have an initial setup fee, and that depends on the complexity of the garment, and we have a per garment fee. The factories then lease the technology to us to produce on demand, and we connect the brands to the factories that have the technology. So the on-demand manufacturing landscape has two different angles. There's the on-demand print, and there's lots of companies working this area already, doing, say, customized cycle gear with a local name on. We're the only ones working in custom fit and niche sizing. There are companies doing this for B2C. The biggest example is Indochino. They have a revenue of $500 million, and they're doing it just for suits. Now imagine us doing that for all the brands in the world. And also we have great economies of scale. By centralizing the process of doing the custom fit, we can get that price really cheap, and by year 5 we want to be as simple as a grader doing standard sizing now to make a custom fit garment.
We've gotten so far through the support of Innovate UK, so we've received around £220,000 in funding. This year we have another 50k from Innovate UK, and we have received funding from Carbon 13, who's our first investor. We have 2 pilots lined up. We can't name them unfortunately, but their combined turnover is £7 billion. What we are aiming for is to use these pilots to really further generalize our entire supply chain system, and spend 6 months doing that, produce around 4,000 on-demand garments with these 2 brands and sell them to real customers. We've already sold last year actually 2,500 garments which were all produced on demand, no returns. Once we generalize the system, we will start rolling out to factories, which will open up a market of brands which these factories are already serving. And by the end of 18 months, we would have produced nearly 16,000 on-demand garments and been adopted by 25 factories across the UK. We have a software-focused development strategy, and we're seeking a small investment of £500,000 over 18 months, a third of which will go towards developing the software further, a fifth of which will go to getting the hardware off our books. This hardware is made up of off-the-shelf components, and we will be licensing it out to a partner company. And finally, a fifth will go to business development, which means liaising with more brands and covering some costs of pilots. So help us say goodbye to this obsolete practice of mass manufacturing and overproduction, and say hello to AI-driven, clean, distributed, on-demand production. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, we're all aware of the impacts that fashion has on the climate. The IPCC reports that the fashion accounts for 10% of global carbon dioxide emissions. I'm thrilled that you guys are coming up with a solution to try and tackle this. Thank you so much. My first question would be how you guys ensure quality assurance and in-house expertise to ensure the delivery of such high quality garments.
So there are 2 parts. One, we have to make sure that it's sewn correct in the first place. We are creating a standard library of annotations and little seam finishes, which means that we will be standardizing seam finishes across brands and always going for the highest quality seam finish. For example, this garment which I'm wearing today is entirely finished with front seams, and that means that it is much more durable. So by focusing on fewer finishes, we will be overall improving the quality of garments and increasing the speed of doing that finish. Secondly, you're absolutely right. It's really tricky with on-demand production, quality management, because there's the quantity of one being produced every time. And so Simon will talk about the software bit.
So the AI actually optimizes for who's worked on a garment before, who has the knowledge within the factory to work on that particular garment and do it correctly. And it also ensures the factory has resilience, so it makes sure that enough people know how to work on a particular finish within the group.
Thank you. And how scalable would you say that is?
So the entire system is designed to be scalable and to fit in with a traditional factory which doesn't have a lot of technology within it. My background is as a human-centered designer, so we've designed the system with garment workers. We're ensuring scalability through the following ways. First of all, making sure that a typical pattern cutter can use the machinery and understand the AI system. So when we go into factories, we don't even talk about AI or digital twin manufacturing. Second, the cost of adoption of our system is very low. So as compared to like-for-like automatic cutting machines, we've reduced the cost by a third and the weight by a tenth. This means factories no longer need 3-phase power to adopt our machinery, they no longer need to have designated space of 300 square feet for fitting in this machine, because our machine is 50 kgs, it sits on top, you can use the entire space underneath. This is one of the main pain points for factories. Every cutting machine can produce, for a assuming mass manufacturing prices, about 200,000 pounds of inventory per year. So that's how we are ensuring scalability.
Thank you. And can you paint me a picture of the onboarding process with your key clients and how long this takes, and also the manufacturing cycles once an order's been placed?
Absolutely. So for any client, it's a huge deal to shift from mass manufacturing to on-demand production. So the first thing which we do is we request for getting the right people in the room. And this means getting the head of production, head of design, and head of sustainability in the room, understanding which particular garments are the ones where they are facing overproduction and maximum returns. So some brands, like say, if I say the name Burberry to you, you'll immediately think trench coat. They have low mix and they have high volumes. That means with fewer SKUs, they have more volumes. Whereas some brands, like if I say Balenciaga to you, that has a high mix. So we have to understand which products have the most overproduction and to what extent are fabrics being used and sourced. We then identify with them styles which would make the most sense to convert based on either overproduction or the potential to charge a premium for custom fit. Once the product is decided, we then understand the existing supply chain and we set up an A and B test, which means they can then compare. Our job is to convince them to say, on demand will lead to lower carbon emissions, yes, but being realistic, we also have to make sure that we are adding to their bottom line. And so we then set targets by saying, okay, our pilot test will do these 5 things. We will ensure that you have an extra 10% conversion, or it totally depends on the numbers of the brand. So we create those targets. And we make sure that we've already baselined the current process. Like, this is the amount of overproduction which happened last year. This is the amount of reduction we're aiming for this year. And then we run the test for 3 months and then step back and see the results. Typically, we have always outperformed. But this year, our biggest pilots were 2 very large brands. So we're really excited for those and getting big numbers behind us.
And talking about the custom fit, I'm trying to understand the size of the market opportunity.
Yes.
For example, what percentage of Burberry's styles are made to order?
So right now they only offer a few styles as made to order, and they tend to have 2 ways of made to order. One is made to order, which is with regards to embellishments, placement of embroidery, which is a lower price point, but made to order and custom fit goes for them up to £8,000 per item. I actually am not aware of the percentage of the total business.
It's worth about 8 billion at the moment in Europe, and it's growing 10% per year, so it's a rapidly expanding market.
Yeah. It's growing faster than luxury is growing.
Okay. And I'm keen to understand the lessons that you learned from your company, the manufacturing business that you mentioned.
Yes, so I worked with semi-skilled workers when I was in India, and 150 at a time. We set up factories, which were some were temporary factories near the site, because we were in construction and the materials were really heavy. The biggest thing which I learned is that machinery and automation have to be understandable and work alongside the worker. It doesn't have to, we're not talking about undervaluing the skill of the workers. And this is even more relevant in the fabric industry, because while we are automating cutting and we are automating certain parts of sewing, the way the fabric construction is still a craftsman-based process. And it's the way the fabric is handled which leads to the finish being good. And some garment workers will specialize only in working with silk. Some will specialize only in working with woolen suits. And we have to make sure that we are working with them, and the technology is something which actually helps them have more agency and control over their tasks. So we are following this model of NUMI, which is Toyota and GM's car manufacturing plant, where they completely changed the dynamic between managers and workers by implementing a similar system to what we have.
Thank you. And you've mentioned Burberry and IKEA, and I'm just wondering what other customers you have in the pipeline, or who your ideal customers are, and how you propose to acquire them and convert them.
So our ideal customers in the first tier are vertically integrated companies who are based in the UK or EU. The reason being, if they have their own factories, they then understand and can integrate our software and hardware much more easily. If they're working with factories which are outside their supply chain, then we have to go and then embed ours. So ideal customers are mid-range to luxury companies which are selling garments between 300 to 1,500 pounds per item, and have vertically integrated production at the moment.
We're actually working on our first partnership with a London factory at the moment, so this is the first time we can work with non-integrated brands as well.
And in terms of the revenues that you already generated, I assume that was from pilot projects?
Yeah, that was a 3-month pilot
Okay.
with 5 small brands, where we produced 2,500 garments with a team of 3 machinists.
Okay.
Over a little over 3 months.
Yeah, it was towards the end of last year, and we set up a factory in South London, so within the urban environment, producing clothes. So one of our dreams is clothes being produced as close to where they're sold as possible, so they have that least travel. So you can almost have these international designs going around, but local manufacture with local material.
And what was the feedback from those pilots?
So we have some statistics like for custom fit, the speed was 10x for getting to market. So we worked with a brand who were offering custom fit jumpsuits, and we helped them create a custom fit skirt. They offered customers a lead time of 8 weeks, and we got it down to 5 days, which was great, and we had no returns on 60 items. We offer, for one brand, which was a fast moving brand with a very simple product, they were new to market, and we enabled them to create 200 plus styles over a period of 3 months, and help them actually get down their product mix to 7 styles, because that was very quick testing of the market. And then with the third brand, we helped them incorporate inclusive sizing into their product range and reduce their overproduction to 0, because they're a very well-known sustainability brand actually.
And as we know, of course, this is a big problem, and there are plenty of startups who are tackling the fashion crisis. And I'm just wondering who your top competitor is and how you differentiate against them.
So I think in terms of competitors, the fashion industry is going to be missing the 1.5 degree target by nearly 50%, right? You mentioned the figure of 10%. I think there's estimates which say 4% to 10% contribution to global emissions. 10% is a little bit on the higher side. So I think in terms of competitors, I guess our competitor, there's an American company called Tech, which is producing hardware, and they have software for on-demand production. They're integrating into factories. Yeah.
So a lot of the other competitors are mainly focusing on the software, and they're having trouble scaling because they don't have the cheap hardware that can be adopted. In London, out of the 1,500 factories, there's only one which is actually ready for digital setup at the moment. The rest are using traditional techniques. But by offering this cheap hardware, it just allows us to scale so much quicker, which is something that the other competitors are finding as a blocker.
And last question, British shoppers are said to be buying twice as much as they were a decade ago. Of course, there are plenty of brands that are trying to keep up with this demand. I'm just wondering how quickly you guys can kind of meet that demand, and
So I don't think it's completely about meeting that demand. It's also about changing the relationship with clothing. And something we want to do by bringing in custom fit and personalization is increasing that emotional attachment to clothing. And if we can increase the lifetime of clothing in the UK by 9 months per garment. That saves 10 million tonnes of carbon equivalent per year just in the UK. So it's also about building this new relationship with clothes as well.
Exactly. So it's not actually, using the word degrowth is important, and it's important to acknowledge it, but our model enables brands to produce less by preventing overproduction, but also preventing production of garments which go into clearance, which really doesn't add to their bottom line. And if we do that, then the value growth, which they'll have an overall reduction in the inventory they are producing and selling, so fewer garments sold, but an increase in value growth of up to 15%. And that's what we're focusing on. That, right now a lot of brands talk about rental and resale, but the fact is it's only 1% of their revenue. We're imagining a future where rental and resale, like this is 25 years down the line, right? Let's say rental and resale it becomes a third each, and only 2/3 garments are new garments which are being sold. But when each of us buys a new garment, that garment is something which has been made for us. We have insight into the factory and the people who made it, and we don't yearn to buy new garments that often. So it's really about that emotional connection, and there's lots of research around that of custom fit and emotional durability.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, consumer behaviour is changing, so I hope that's in your tailwinds. Thank you so much. That was a great pitch, and yeah.
Thank you.